So, guys, another round of crazy Russian news continuing to pour in from the savage Russian hell state. Economic catastrophe continuing to unfold. Before we get into all these stories, one of which appears to be some of the largest protests to ever take place in the nation of Hungary. These are anti-Orban protests, anti-Russian protests. We've got the China and Russia story regarding sanctions. U.S. sanctions now has India and China both coming out announcing they are going to lay off the giant purchases of Russian oil and source other suppliers. As we know, that's been the main fueler of Russia's entire global terror binge. We got a number of stories like this on the Kremlin propaganda front, on the Georgia front. I'll bring back the Donetsk influencers once again, but first we have to cover what happened last night here in Kyiv. About 3 a.m., we were awakened by what you can see here in this video. It's the aftermath. The market is still open despite a massive Russian ballistic missile attack on the city at about 3:30 a.m. this morning. And these missiles came in so fast that it wasn't even an air alert. Normally you get an alert on your phone and it says, ballistic missiles incoming, and you get some time to prepare for that. Some people stay in their apartments, some people go underground. Everyone has their own sort of regime. And, it wasn't like that this time. It bypassed the air alert, and that's just not good news. These are massive explosions. They sent 9 ballistic missiles onto the good people of Kyiv last night. They also attacked some other cities, Dnipropetrovsk. Anyway, this is what Russian culture is all about. It's about murder and looting and all the things that Russian culture entails. But now on to the good news, some of the largest protests to ever take place in Hungary. I'll read you what the opposition candidate, Magyar Peter, said this morning. Yesterday we held what was perhaps the largest political event in Hungary's history. Resolute yet peaceful and joyful. People came from all over the world and from every Hungarian town and village to stand up for a truly free, humane, and functioning Hungary. Just absolutely massive protests in Hungary. People want a return to democracy. The Orban regime has spent the Russian-backed Orban regime has spent the past 15 years looting the country into its new position of the poorest nation in the EU, and that's by personal consumption now as of June, according to Eurostat. And meanwhile, right next door is Poland, that now has a $1 trillion GDP that's going to actually, within the next 7 years, is on track to have a larger economy than Russia itself. They were only They had a $65 billion economy when they exited Moscow's grip in 1990. From 65 billion now to 1 trillion. That's Poland, right next door to Hungary. And Hungary is just getting poorer and poorer. A massive protest against the Russian-backed government of Hungary, with Peter Magyar absolutely destroying Orban in the polls. If Orban allows a free election, it's over for Putin's puppet. You have to realize that Putin losing Hungary is a very, very, very big deal. This opposition candidate is polling ahead of him by, from depending upon the poll, from 15 to 20%. He is young, fit, charismatic, not corrupt, and he does things like walk across Hungary. The guy's in the gym. People like him. And he wants to put this Russian-backed candidate on, this Russian-backed kleptocrat, Viktor Orban, on trial in the EU, not in Hungary, where Viktor Orban has managed to stack the judiciary with all sorts of pro-Russian monsters. And so this is going to be historic. Putin has used Hungary as a wedge against the civilized world to paralyze the EU, to paralyze NATO. There's a rousing speech by Peter Magyar. I'll just show you some segments of it. Hungarians who gave their lives for their homeland and freedom. He's talking about, this is on the anniversary of the 1956 revolution, in which Hungarians managed to oust the Russians for about 3 days, until the Russians came back 3 days later with tanks and murdered from between 2,500 and 3,000 people. This is the anniversary of that, October 23rd. He just talks about the fate is now ours to be worthy heirs to the heroes of 1956. It now befalls us to stand together. This is about ousting Russian control. The Russians have managed to gain control of this country, as they have in Georgia. So please now, as you all link hands and he tells everyone to link hands, and they just talk about honoring the heroes of 1956. And make no mistake, this is all about Russia. This is about ousting these people with their eyes closed. These people believe in democracy. They want to live in a free, democratic nation of innovation. Everything that they've seen, all the success that they've seen in Poland. And it's not only Hungary that the gargoyle midget is losing. The Moscow gargoyle is losing China, which is a very, very big deal, you guys. This Russian collapse is going to be even better than the several other Russian collapses. Exclusive from Reuters. China state oil majors suspend Russian oil buys due to sanctions. And this is just awesome news, you guys. China and, as I said, China and India, they are the main financiers of all the global terrorism. Putin's propaganda matrix, the wars, the destabilization, all the global terror binge that Russia has unleashed on the civilized world over these past, God, I guess it's almost been 20 years now. It's about 2005. India, it's not just China, it's now India. Reliance, India's largest importer of Russian oil, is preparing to adjust its operations in line with new Western sanctions against Moscow. This news is from this morning. The company, controlled by billionaire Mukesh Ambani and operating the world's largest refining complex in Jamnagar, Gujarat, it's in India, had previously signed a long-term agreement to purchase up to 500,000 barrels of Russian crude per day. This is this is the largest refinery complex in the entire world, and it's in India. Following the latest EU, UK, and US sanctions targeting Russia's energy sector, including restrictions on Rosneft and Lukoil, Reliance announced that it would take into account changing market and regulatory conditions. And this is just really good news. If they follow, I'm sure they'll set up a million shell companies in Cyprus or something in order to buy, to continue buying what they can. But it's going to be very difficult, and the sanctions are always going to follow them, maybe with a little delay. But this guy that owns this company, he's the guy that runs this company, this Reliance. He has now become the richest man in Asia because of this war. I'll read you what I wrote. Mukesh Ambani, now the richest man in Asia because of helping Putin murder people in Ukraine. No one has made more money from the war than this creature, purchasing almost 25% of Russia's oil output. Let's hope Ukraine one day returns the favor. Behind India's massive Russian oil imports, Asia's richest man. This story is from August, and it got very little play, and I wish people would understand this, because he's a very, very, very bad guy. He has made more money from the murder of Ukrainian people than anybody. Reliance's Russian crude imports have soared from 3% before the war in Ukraine to 50% now. And it's not just China and India that Putin is losing. I read you what I wrote. We're witnessing the end of Putin's world, and this Serbia's only oil refinery is on the verge of shutting down due to U.S. sanctions against a Gazprom subsidiary. And you have to understand, you guys, imagine if Trump would have done this on day one in office. And it's not just the oil industry that is in a state of total collapse. The Russian oil industry, Russian economy continues to collapse, with steel industry hitting its lowest in 10 years. This is a screenshot from an article from Kommersant, Russian propaganda Kommersant. And these are the fudged numbers, you guys. This isn't, probably is not even the real deal. Steel has rolled back a decade. Metal consumption has fallen to multi-year lows. Steel demand in the Russian market fell by 15% over the first 10 months, reaching multi-year lows in the third quarter. By the end of the year, the decline in metal consumption will be comparable. And what has played out in the overall consumption and production of metal is nowhere near as bad as what we've seen in the earnings reports from the likes of Severstal or MMK. These are the two largest steel producers in Russia. They are laying off, thousands of people, moving down to a 3-day work week. And it's really kept pretty quiet, but it's becoming now, we're starting to see it in mainstream Russian news now, which is really a step in the right direction. And so as soon as these sanctions were rolled out, the U.S. sanctions, in conjunction with the EU sanctions. Can't leave them out. The 19th set package of EU sanctions came out on the same day as the U.S. sanctions. As they should have always. The U.S. should work in conjunction with the rest of the free world. They shouldn't be like this island of, let's try to save Putin because we want to do business with him. Putin says that the sanctions they spent billions to avoid won't affect the Russian economy, right? And it wasn't just Putin being rolled out. Within hours of the sanctions, I don't even need to show you this. I mean, this is like just Putin. Quote, in quote, Putin. Ukrainian intelligence says that there are at least four Putins. Anyway, desperate Putin begs Trump to save his war. So they rolled out Putin immediately when the U.S. sanctions were announced. And then they sent this guy on the first plane out. The Kremlin has dispatched its chief Ukraine negotiator to Washington in a stark admission. Vladimir Putin is running out of diplomatic options. Sources confirm that Kirill Dmitriev, a close associate of Putin and former investment banker at Goldman Sachs, is in the U.S. urging Donald Trump to intervene and salvage Russia's standing. He has been on every TV show. In the past 12 hours, he has done CNN, Fox News, all the right-wing guys. He's done all the podcasts. He is out talking about all the business that Russia and the United States should be doing if they can just, quote, identify the, quote, root causes of the war and basically push Ukraine to surrender and hand Putin a political victory that'll be sufficient to save his failing term in office. Anyway, Kirill Dmitriev is doing everything he can because they are absolutely desperate. And it's not just so that they sent Putin out within 12 hours. They sent Kirill Dmitriev to the U.S. Now they've got the a little bit off script here. I'll read you what I wrote. Kremlin propagandists go off script, finally saying out loud that their economy is being destroyed. Yet, like the dying days of the USSR, when Russians continued their invasions and an arm race, they only expand their global terror binge. And this is one of the biggest Kremlin propaganda shows. This is the number 2 most popular. This is for domestic audience. This is Kremlin domestic audience. Someone was kind enough to add subtitles. With all due respect, that all other citizens. He's talking about Trump. He's saying Trump is no longer our ally. What happened? We thought he was our boy, and now what's going on? He's allowing Zelensky to destroy our refineries. They've sanctioned our 2 largest oil companies. And they're worried now. I'm convinced this is off script. Because they're worried. This is they don't know how to deal with this. They didn't think it was going to happen. This is a serious calamity for them now. Who we sell our oil to? And it wasn't only the largest Kremlin propagandists and Russia and China and Serbia and for losing Orban in Hungary. Everything is piling up. I'll read you what I wrote here. This is a woman that regularly harasses me on Twitter. This is Putin's. I'll read you what I wrote. Hitting the bottle especially hard these days, Kremlin Press Secretary Zakharova emerges from her cirrhosis-ridden stupor to whine about everyone being so mean to Russia. And this woman, I mean, man, look, I'm being kind when I see these things about her. It will only prolong the pain, the agony of the Kyiv regime. So once again, the old Kremlin propaganda narrative that if Ukraine will just surrender, everybody will be fine, and we can all go back to making lots of money. And they say that Ukraine is in debt. In the end, Europeans will have to bear full responsibility for the consequences of any seizure or other manipulations of our reserves. You see, she is now beyond knowing that the West is fully united. Now they're on to, well, look, but we don't want to pay for the war. Don't take our money. This is $300 billion in frozen Russian assets that still lie in contention, as well as for repaying the loans previously granted to Zelensky's gang. Yes, the gang that includes basically the entire free world. The GDP percentage of global GDP that is NATO is 30%. Google it. NATO, the constituent countries of NATO represent 30% of global GDP. The USSR was 14% of global GDP. Russia represents from 1.8 to 2% of global GDP, right? It is nothing. It is nothing. The only thing that kept them afloat was the threat of this giant military, all these tanks and missiles and everything that Russia had inherited from the Soviet Union that they could use to threaten the world. They don't have that anymore. And Russia is not the USSR, folks, and everyone is mistaken in thinking that it is. Anyway, Ukraine is not legitimate. They say you will receive no reparations from Russia. As for repaying its debts, let's be frank, they are too afraid to admit it. They won't be able to. Ukraine is the most mineral, resource-rich, and most strategic location in Europe, and that's why Russia wants it so bad, because the rest of the war that Putin wants to inflict upon the good people of Europe, he cannot move on to that phase until he gets control of Ukraine, its resources, and its strategic location. So you have to understand that they are trying to minimize the value of Ukraine. Oh, just forget about Ukraine. You don't need Ukraine. Yeah, and they're trying to say that Ukraine won't be able to repay its debts. Germany just finished repaying its World War II debts, by the way, whatever, in 2010. And meanwhile, Russian society, while they're trying to cover their asses to save the gargoyle midget in Moscow, Russian society continues to devolve. I'll read you what I wrote here. While the Kremlin is spending billions a year to sow conflict in Western nations and convince Americans that European streets are a hell of Muslim, quote, non-consensual sexual things, Russia continues to devolve into chaos. Migrants in Moscow outnumber law enforcement and attack passersby. And this is just... The Kremlin propaganda matrix wants to convince you that Russia is a bastion of Christian conservative values, and if you just move there and let them eventually kidnap you and hold you for ransom and trade you for some Kremlin assassin, that everything is going to be awesome. Russia is devolving into chaos. Socially, economically, infrastructural decay on every metric. And this is normal stuff in Russia. These things are happening all the time. And Russians are increasingly dissatisfied with all the new taxes that the Putin regime and the regional governments are inflicting upon them in order to pay for the war. I'll read you what I wrote here. In the Russian city of Penza, a solo demonstrator came out to protest the new water tax. This is just one of many new taxes Russians will now be forced to pay as the economy is swallowed by the war. The Penza Water Company is owned by billionaire oligarch Viktor Vekselberg. And this is, the sign says, make Vekselberg pay. So the oligarchs are not happy, and Putin needs to make sure they're kind of happy, but not so happy. And he lets them sort of treat these regions as their own little fiefdoms, and they're allowed to basically loot everything in sight. They didn't arrest this guy because he used to be in parliament, this particular guy. That's the backstory. Anyone else did that, they would probably be arrested for the mandatory 3 to 12 days. You can criticize the regional governments, but you can't criticize the federal government. You can't criticize the Putin regime itself. That will get you up to 12 years in prison. Let's skip over to the barbarity of everything that Russians are doing in the areas of Ukraine that Russians have managed to occupy. As I've covered before, this subculture of, quote, influencers that exist in Russian-occupied Ukraine. You know how you have influencers there in New York or in Saskatchewan or Texas or London. And, they want to push, say, like nutritional supplements with their Instagram, or there's a restaurant opening. Well, in Russian-occupied Donetsk, how it works is local gangsters steal apartments of people that have been Ukrainians that have been murdered or that have fled to free Ukraine. They steal those apartments. And what they do is they need someone to sell those off. Basically as like the position of a realtor. And some of these realtors are rather creative. They go to Instagram and they sell the apartments of very often dead Ukrainian people. Anyway, I'll just read you what I wrote. The depravity, cruelty, and barbarism of Russians in occupied areas of Ukraine can't be fully understood without seeing the guys that make Instagram videos to sell apartments of Ukrainians that were either murdered or have fled. Even sold with all their personal items. as you will see here. And this is his name is Kirill Sirios, and that's his like cool little nickname. He's got an Instagram account, and one of the things that he does, he also goes and opens like little shops that sell counterfeit goods and all the other. Russian occupied Ukraine is gangsters. It's just gangsters. People are kidnapped. If you try to start, I mean, I had a friend that had. I've had few friends that have had restaurants and things, and guys just come before they fled here to Kyiv, and they just come in and just steal your. They bring a notary, and you have to sign over your business. If not, you just disappear. And this is Kirill Sirius selling an apartment, talking about how great it is. It all has all the personal items of these people that fled or were killed. We don't know. Some of these places tend to be bombed out, like the one I showed you last week. The same blogger was all bombed out. This one wasn't. It looks like the people were just. Looks like they just fled. All the personal items. This is obviously like an elderly couple or an elderly woman that lived in this particular apartment. You can tell from the decorations. And all their personal pictures are still on the walls. I'll show you. Personal pictures are still on the walls. And he's talking about how great everything in that TV from like 1987. Anyway, he walks just like you would if you were selling your house in Montana or something. He talks about again how the chandelier is not Chinese. It's a good chandelier. If you saw the video last week that I showed you, where he was selling like a stolen movie theater, and here he is again. He wears he likes to wear these bright little suits. And anyway, here's someone else's apartment that he walks you through and. Talks about how great the apartment is and how you have a balcony. And how a deal like this works is you go and meet at a notary, you bring a bag of cash, and you buy the apartment for whatever, $25,000, $10,000, $1,000, whatever. And a group of gangsters meets you there, and the notary signs it over to you, and then you are the owner. But most of these buildings, they don't have any functioning water or electricity. This is another one in Makiyivka, where Russians have killed many, many people. It's now Russian occupied. This is the very center of the city. And all Ukrainians have, most all Ukrainians have fled. It's now Russians just moving into the town and buying these apartments for almost nothing. Anyway, it should make you sick to watch this. You know, I don't think we need to even go into this. But this is the nature of, this is what you are subjected to. This is what life in Russian-occupied Ukraine is. And it's not only him, it's an encore presentation of Miss Donetsk, one of the most prolific and charismatic in her own weird way. Here's her selling a motorcycle. Another influencer from Donetsk. She says, my legs automatically open when I get on this motorcycle. My legs are forced to be open. Yes. And I'm bringing her back because you guys demanded it. And I saw the comments, and I know how much you love her. And yes, this is what Ukraine is keeping out of the civilized world, by the way. Yes, so thank Ukraine that these monsters are not, when you vacation with your family in Sardinia or in Miami or on the ski slopes of Aspen, you don't see these creatures. And just remember that the good people of Georgia, there in Tbilisi, are now on their 331st day of protests against this 11-month, so far, occupation of their government by this Russian-backed regime that is now disappearing people. All the Russian-backed elements of culture are now on display, and these good people are like the people in Hungary. They just want to get the Russians out. And yes, they continue, and I hope you can support these guys, or at least tell them, just let people know that this is still happening. And further on the atrocities in Russian-occupied Ukraine, every region of Ukraine that has managed to become occupied by Russians now faces the exact same world, just absolute atrocities, and we don't even know the full scale because Ukrainians are pushed out and flee to free Ukraine. And like in the city of Mariupol, it's somewhere from 80,000 people to 120,000 people that the Russians murdered there. Mass graves outside the city continue to grow, according to satellite imagery. Russians continue committing atrocities in Ukraine's Donetsk region. 3 days ago, a woman escaped after witnessing Russians massacre her entire family in the town of Zvanivka. Russians are doing this in every area of Ukraine they manage to enter. And this is about 4 days ago. It's just on the 20th. I'll let you read it. Anyway, Russians came and executed her whole family. I kept falling and thinking I'm dead. This nightmare is over. At least we all died together. Her whole family was executed 4 days ago. And I was alive. That I cried before I couldn't cry. Russian soldiers burst into Olga's home on October 20th. The family, the whereabouts, asking about the whereabouts of Ukrainian troops. She and her husband, read this from the beginning. Russian soldiers burst into Olga's home on October 20th and questioned the family about the whereabouts of Ukrainian troops. She and her husband and their elder son were hiding in the cellar. Their younger son had gone to a neighbor's to fetch water. I was still confused and said, his son's in the cellar, in the other room. He has no identification. He even had a beard like the soldiers. I thought, they will kill him. Later, she realized that they had already killed him. When the soldiers understood the family didn't know anything, they left. So the Russians left. One of them came back and opened fire. When they shot, it all happened in seconds. He ran in this and said, sorry, it's orders. And then he sprayed everyone with machine gun fire. I fell. She was hit in the jaw. And I even grabbed a knife. She said, I could even slaughter a chicken in my life. And here I was about to stab this Russian soldier. Stab him in the stomach. And I let him shoot me. I ran out and shouted like a wounded person all across the whole village. Where are you, you animal? Come here. Then she realized there was no one left. Neither Russian nor Ukrainian soldiers. I was alone in this part of the village. Everything was burning and exploding, a horror film. Olga, who suffered a gunshot wound to the jaw, struggled for 12 hours to reach territory controlled by Ukraine. That day, Russian forces executed 4 civilians in Zvanivka. Olga's husband and her 2 sons and a neighbor. As of October 8th, 191,763 crimes of aggression and other war crimes by the Russian Federation have been registered in Ukraine. That's only the registered, that's officially, that's everything that we know about. But the areas that Russia hasn't managed to occupy, no one knows really what's happening there. We still don't know how many people are buried in mass graves in Mariupol, for example. And further on the atrocities being committed by Russians in every area of Ukraine that Russians managed to occupy. A 21-year-old Ukrainian woman has just been sentenced by Russia to 14 years in prison for running a Telegram channel called Melitopol is Ukraine. Her name is Yana Suvarova. She was 19 when the Russians abducted her from occupied Melitopol. The Russian court found her guilty of, in quotes, guilty of terrorism, espionage, and participation in a terrorist community. That's the Russian world, jailing Ukrainians for words while bombing our cities every day. And here she is, one of the brave Ukrainian heroes. And closing on a brighter note, the opposite of what we normally do here, closing on something a little darker. A charismatic leader is absolutely key. It's essential. I'll read you what Anna wrote here. Everyone rose for Zelensky, one by one, not applause, but respect. Europe knows who's fighting for its freedom. Ukraine holding the line of civilization led by this guy that despite the war, Zelensky learned English, during this war while sleeping like 2 hours a night and managing the largest war since World War II, a genocidal war. You've got to just give this guy some respect. And meanwhile, he does it with a smile. And it's just absolutely incredible. Right man, right place, right time. Okay, guys, have a good one.